We are very privileged today to have in studio live our international correspondent, Alex Newman. Alex, hello.
Great to be here. Thank you so much, Duke.
Nice to have you here in person. And we've got, of all the other things we're dealing with now, we've got the metaverse and we've got the virtual world to contend with for our kids. And this is a pretty horrifying report you have for us about what educrats are planning for our American school kids moving forward.
Yeah, it is absolutely astounding, the depths of the depravity here. I was just at a conference over the weekend in Los Angeles, and Patrick Wood, a friend of mine, a great researcher, historian. He's the head of Citizens for Free Speech. He collaborated with Anthony Sutton on a book about the Trilateral Commission. He's the head of Technocracy.news, probably the leading expert and the leading critic on technocracy other than the maniacs promoting it. And his talk was on propaganda and the new methods of delivering propaganda. And he was talking about virtual reality and the metaverse. And it was really funny. He said, do not ever let your children go into the metaverse. Would you let your children smoke meth just one time? And of course the answer is no. He said, okay, then don't let your children into the metaverse.
Hey, before we move on, real quick, what is the metaverse for those who may not know?
Good question. Thank you, Duke. And the metaverse is basically an alternative universe in the virtual world that's being developed by the little fascist Mark Zuckerberg and his cronies. And the idea is that the universe that God created was not adequate, so we're going to create this new fake universe where Mark Zuckerberg will be our overlord and we'll decide what we can say and what we can't say and what we can see and what we can't see. And we'll all go spend time in the metaverse, and we'll meet our friends in the metaverse, and we'll have business meetings in the metaverse. And so then I don't have to come into the studio, we could just be in the metaverse. And so now they're pushing this. The World Economic Forum, one of the most diabolical organizations on the planet, headed by Mr. Klaus Schwab with a ridiculous German accent, who says, you know, we need a fourth industrial revolution, we're going to merge man with machine. So they're now peddling this idea of getting the kids in the schools sucked into the metaverse, putting these weird virtual reality headsets on them so they could be totally immersed in this alternative universe that they're building. And ultimately the end goal is to more effectively push the propaganda and the manipulation of our children.
Right, and with regards to the metaverse and Klaus Schwab and these organizations that are pushing this, we should be very mindful of this, that this is the Great Reset, right? If you weren't quite sure what that means, this is a complete reorienting of humanity. Among other things, offering a kind of weird life everlasting through linking up human consciousness with machines.
That's right.
This is a step towards this. It is everything the great writers of the 20th century warned you about. All of the dystopian novelists. Be very careful when rationalism and technology become the God that governs us. It's going to be hell for moms and dads, and it's going to be really hell for kids in schools. How do you think it will look in the schools?
Well, you actually just hit on a huge point that I want to touch on, Duke, about this idea of creating God or becoming gods. That is literally what they're saying. One of Klaus Schwab's advisors, a very prominent transhumanist who's working with the World Economic Forum, recommended by Barack Obama, Angela Merkel, all the clown show. He's saying we are evolving into gods by implanting ourselves with this technology, by merging our minds with the Borg. We are going to evolve into what he calls Homo Deus. Instead of Homo sapiens, we're going to be human gods. And this is very dangerous. And you know, another one of the things that I want to touch on in terms of how it's going to look in the schools, Duke, is the data. Okay, one of the things that is not being addressed that needs to be talked about is, you know, when you're in the real world, as long as you're not being monitored by all kinds of weird technology, you're not leaving a data trail on everything you do, everything you say, everything you think. Once they've got you sucked into this virtual world, and we saw this during COVID, right? All the churches had to go online, so suddenly Facebook was able to censor what you're saying. But the data gathering that's going to be taking place on our children when everything that they do is in these virtual environments is simply astounding. And aside from them just having all this data, which is troubling enough, they're using this data to perfect their manipulation. So they're giving children different stimuli and then monitoring their reaction and determining whether an intervention is needed. Maybe they have the wrong attitude about open borders or killing babies or the LGBT movement. Then they recognize this through the data signatures that are being collected, and then they figure out, all right, well, we got to manipulate this child further. We've got to put him through that course again, or put him through a new exposure of a new topic to make sure that they get the right attitude. So this is absolutely diabolical, and it needs to be resisted.
Well over a century ago, the German philosopher Nietzsche actually said, God is dead. We philosophers have murdered him. Do you not smell the stench of his rotting corpse on our knife? But if that's going to work, Nietzsche said, man must become God to become worthy of that sacrifice of God. And here you are 100 years later, 120 years later, and the philosophers have been replaced by the technologers, and that's exactly what we're shooting for, right? It is the Tower of Babel all over again, and it's not going to end well. And before there's any justice, divine justice that comes to our aid, it's going to be really hard on Americans and freedom and liberty, and especially your kids.